Looks like we all fit in the room now, so I guess some of the people on the wait list decided not to pursue the class, which is good. If you were among the first 15 people on the waiting list as of last Thursday, right after class, I gave you access to the problem sets and was expecting you to ping me to sign up for the discussion group. So that was sort of the threshold, was 15 people. And we'll see what happens from there. Has anybody managed to roll off the waiting list into the class in the last few days? A couple people? Okay, so a few people have actually dropped. Right. Are there any questions before we get going? Like, how did somebody get tenure at Berkeley without learning how to tell time? Somehow when I started the lecture last time, I knew that it ended at 12:30, but when 12 rolled along, I was sure it ended at noon. So, questions, anything? Okay, I've gotten requests to join the discussion group from not quite 70 people. If you haven't sent in your request yet, please do. There were some people who followed a broken link, it was my fault, that went to the discussion list for Stat N21 from the summer. If you tried to sign up for the summer discussion group, I didn't add you to the summer discussion group. You'll need to ask again to sign up for this discussion group. So there's roughly 70 people, so I'm expecting roughly another 45 or so to send requests. So please do include your SID in the request, so I'll be able to check that you're enrolled. Anything else? A number of people have tried the homework. Looks like it's working for those who've tried it. Yes?
I tried several answers for that one. It didn't say select all that apply, so it's kind of tough to try that.
Okay. Yeah. Generally, if in the answers, let me just look at this. Show you an example here on the screen. If you're only supposed to select one answer, then it's a drop-down kind of thing, and you can only select one answer. And if you're supposed to select all that apply, then there will be a somewhere down here, a whole lot of answers, and you can select all of them that you feel apply. So if you got, if your grade was damaged as a result of that, send me an email separately. We'll figure something out. But that's generally, this is what to look for. Does everybody know how to select more than one answer in these things? Okay, great. Other questions? Mumblings? Okay. All right. Before I cut myself off last time, we were talking about valid rules of reasoning and going on to some invalid rules of reasoning, fallacious rules, formal fallacies. So these are just basic rules of logic that apply across all domains. And we're studying them now partly because people often commit fallacies in the course of trying to make a statistical argument or a quantitative argument or any kind of argument whatsoever. It happens a lot in political discourse, and I will show you some videos of ads, I think, for and against Prop 8, and then there's some McCain ads and some other stuff that we'll look at with these sort of fallacies in mind to kind of see what happens. They're not specifically statistical, but they illustrate how people use fallacies rhetorically to try to influence opinion, get you to draw a particular conclusion. All right. Formal fallacies are basically math errors. So, for example, if you know that A or B is true, it does not follow that A is true. A or B might be true because B is true, not because A is true. Right? This is. There is, A or B can be true if A is true, if B is true, or if both are true. So if you know that A or B is true and you know that A is true, it doesn't follow that B is false. Right? B could also be true. Not both A and B are true. A is not true, therefore B is true. Okay, what's wrong with that? Yes?
You could be saying that they're both false.
Yep. So they could both be false, right? That satisfies they're not both true, right? So they can both not be true. They can not both be true by virtue of this one not being true and that one not being true. All right, if A, then B, B, therefore A. All right, that's like the example we were talking about last time. If it's sunny, then I'll wear sandals. I'm wearing sandals. It doesn't follow that it's sunny. I could wear sandals when it's raining also. Right? I didn't say that I wouldn't. Yep. Okay. Where are we? If A, then B, not A, therefore not B. This is the same thing the other way around. If it's sunny, then I will wear sandals. It isn't sunny. I might still be wearing sandals. These look, the next four look kind of silly. And when you spell them out in letters like this, they're just sort of obviously wrong. But when you hear them in words, they're often very persuasive. And we're going to look at a lot of examples of these things. So these are non sequiturs of evidence and non sequiturs of relevance. So there are two canonical non sequiturs of evidence. One is if A, then B, C, therefore B. Okay? Who would possibly make that mistake? Well, if C sounds a lot like A, when you express it in words, then it's a very common mistake. Similarly, if A, then B, not C, therefore not A. Well, that's crazed, except if not C sounds an awful lot like not B when you express it in words, then you might erroneously conclude not A. All right? These are non sequiturs of evidence because if you think of sort of the evidence is the premises, and then the conclusion is what you're trying to deduce from the evidence. So in this case, these two pieces of evidence, if A, then B, and C, don't let you get any conclusion whatsoever. Right? So there isn't enough evidence to establish any conclusion at all. Right? So that's why these are non sequiturs of evidence. In contrast, these are non sequiturs of relevance. Let's talk about them. If A, then B, A, therefore C. Well, silly expressed in symbols, but if C sounds a lot like B when you express it in words, it's a common mistake. This is a non sequitur of relevance. The premises together do allow you to draw a conclusion. They just don't allow you to draw that conclusion. Right? They're not relevant to the conclusion that C is true. Right? In a non sequitur of evidence, you're missing a premise that relates the evidence that you do have to evidence that you need. So if you had another premise that said, if C, then A. So if you had if A, then B, C, if C, then A, then you could conclude B. Right? You're missing a premise that relates the evidence that you do have to evidence that you need to draw a conclusion. In non sequiturs of relevance, you're missing something else, which is another premise that relates the conclusion that you can draw to the conclusion that you would like to draw. So in this example, if A, then B, A, well, what follows from that? What follows from that is B. So you need another premise that says if B, then C. Right? If you had that premise in addition, then you could conclude that C is true. Okay, so you're, again, a non sequitur of relevance, you're missing a premise, but it's a premise that relates the conclusion that you can draw from the existing premises to the conclusion that you would like to draw. In a non sequitur of evidence, you're missing a premise that relates the evidence that you have, the premises that you have, to a missing premise. And that's the big distinction between these. Is this okay with everybody? So I've had people observe my lecturing and give me feedback, and one thing that I was told not to do is ask, is that okay with everybody? Because that sort of is inviting assent rather than inviting you to express whatever it is you actually feel. So are there any questions?
We have to know the logical name for them, like denying the antecedent, not secular evidence, all that?
Not in any detail. I mean, there are. I'd kind of like you to be able to, there are some fallacies that are fallacies of evidence or fallacies of relevance, which I'd like you to be able, if you see one, you should be able to tell what it is. Oh, this is wrong because it's of this form. What's missing is you can't get any conclusion at all from these premises. So at that level, yes. Detailed Latin names, no. That's culture. We're in statistics. No. Okay, other questions? Yes.
If we come across a problem that says that, there's a non sequitur of evidence, can it be either, or is it specifically one or the other?
I'm sorry. If you come across a problem that says there's a non sequitur of evidence,
Yeah.
could it be either of these?
Yes.
These are both examples of non sequiturs of evidence. So that label applies to both of these things. I don't think that there's a problem that would phrase things that way. I mean, sort of like, which of the following is a non sequitur of evidence, and then select all that apply, kind of a.
Well, when I went through and saw the answers, one of the answers was non sequitur of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't specifically say which particular fallacy it was.
Oh, yeah.
Qualified as non sequitur of evidence.
Okay. Yep. So I think you'll get, as you go through into the exercises in the chapter, you should get a feel for the kind of thing that I'm expecting you to pick up. And it's not, I mean, mostly I'm concerned with your ability to to reason soundly, to make valid inferences, and to recognize when somebody's trying to pull something over on you. So that's what I'm trying to get at. Other stuff? Okay. Informal fallacies are very often fallacies of relevance or fallacies of evidence. These are arguments that actually come up in practice that you hear. A formal fallacy is an error of logic. It's a math error. An informal fallacy is it's an error in reasoning, but there's an enormous bestiary of informal fallacies. We'll give some examples. We'll talk about them. So the fallacies of relevance and fallacies of evidence are instances of formal fallacies of a non sequitur of relevance or non sequitur of evidence. Okay, so when you use that in an argument, you are committing a fallacy of relevance or a fallacy of evidence. So, for example, if you have an argument that says, if A, then B, A, therefore C, and it is true in the world that B does not imply C, then you have committed a fallacy of relevance. Okay? You have an argument that depends on a non sequitur of relevance. All right. And the fallacy of evidence is the other way. Now, we're just going to walk through a number of examples of these fallacies in practice. So many of these have names. The recognition of the existence of these fallacies goes back to classical times. A lot of the names are in Latin as a result of that. Okay, ad hominem arguments. Everybody has probably heard of such a thing. You're attacking the person, not attacking the argument. Okay, this is trying to refute people by saying that they are bad, in essence, or stupid, or whatever it is. So here's an argument. Nancy claims the death penalty is good, but Nancy once set fire to a vacant warehouse. Nancy's evil, therefore the death penalty is a bad thing. Okay? Right, I mean, it's a caricature, yes? I mean, nobody would argue quite that blatantly, but you get much more subtle versions, which is, it's the idea that nothing good can come of something bad. That's not true, right? Okay, why is this? What kind of fallacy is this? I mean, we've named it. It's an ad hominem, but generally, what's going on? We're basically saying that if A, then B, A, therefore C, right? So what's the argument? If somebody sets fire to a vacant warehouse, that person is evil. Nancy set fire to a vacant warehouse, therefore Nancy's opinion about the death penalty is wrong. Right? It doesn't follow, right? So if A, then B, A, we can conclude B. there is a conclusion we can draw. The premises are adequate to draw some conclusion. They just don't allow us to draw the conclusion that the argument's trying to draw. So we have evidence that allows us to draw a conclusion, but that isn't relevant to the conclusion that we're trying to draw. So it's a fallacy of relevance. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. All right. Okay, so a variant of this is guilt by association. And let me see if I can find a good example here. Is this the one I was thinking of? Nope. Sorry, I have to have these in mind clearly. Personal attack. That's got to be it, doesn't it? Yeah.
Barack Obama and domestic terrorist Bill Ayers, friends. They've worked together for years, but Obama tries to hide it. Why? Obama launched his political career in Ayers' living room. Ayers and Obama ran a radical education foundation together. They wrote the foundation's bylaws together. Obama was the foundation's first chairman. Reports say they distributed more than $100 million to ideological allies with no discernible improvement in education. When the relationship became an issue, Obama just responded, "This is a guy who lives in my neighborhood." That's it? We know Bill Ayers ran the violent left-wing activist group called Weather Underground. We know Ayers' wife was on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. We know they bombed the Capitol, the Pentagon, a judge's home. We know Ayers said, "I don't regret setting bombs. I feel we didn't do enough." But Obama's friendship with terrorist Ayers isn't the issue.
Okay, wait. Did she just say it isn't the issue? Why are we talking about it?
Barack Obama's judgment and candor. When Obama just says, "This is a guy who lives in my neighborhood," Americans say, "Where's the truth, Barack?" Barack Obama. Too risky.
All right. Oh yeah, that was a real campaign ad. Okay, so a few things there, right? So first of all, it's guilt by association that, poisoning a well, right? If he's friends with somebody who has done some, illegal, antisocial, whatever, stuff. So first of all, I don't even know the truth of the backstory, so I don't want to opine about it. But does that mean that he's bad, that he's wrong, that he'd make a bad president, any of this other stuff? I mean, it's not connected, right? Nothing good can come of anything bad. If you are on committees with people who are bad, you are therefore bad, and nothing good can come of you, right? That's somehow the argument. Yep. All right. Let's see here. All right. Bad motive. Bob claims the death penalty is a good thing, but his family business manufactures caskets. Bob benefits when people die, so his motives are suspect, therefore the death penalty is a bad thing. Okay, right? So the fact that somebody's motive might or might not be bad, the fact that someone might be acting from self-interest does not in itself make their argument bad, right? So you might want to give their argument extra scrutiny if you think they have an ulterior motive in establishing whatever argument they're trying to make, but in and itself doesn't make them wrong. Okay. Look who's talking, tu quoque. Amy says people shouldn't smoke cigarettes in public because cigarette smoke has a strong odor, but Amy wears strong perfume. Amy's clearly a hypocrite, therefore smoking in public is fine. Okay. This is almost an ad hominem argument, right? It's kind of the same thing. It's basically saying that you can't be trusted because your positions are inconsistent in two different issues. It's not looking at this particular argument that you're making and asking whether it's valid. It's saying, well, if you made this argument here and this other argument there, then you're clearly not to be, then you must be wrong in this case. It doesn't quite follow. This is one of my favorites. Yes, I hit Billy, but Sally hit him first. Okay, it claims that it's okay to do something wrong if somebody else did something wrong first. Usual variants of this are the other wrong, the wrong that justifies the wrong that I committed, was either sooner or more extreme or something like that. So like, yes, I hit Billy, but he was beating me with a baseball bat. I acted in self-defense. Right? That somehow does sound exculpatory, right? I'm not to blame if I hit him because I'm defending myself. But it's a different, that's a different kind of argument. Okay, ad baculum, this is an argument to the stick, an appeal to force. There are a lot of arguments like this. If you don't give me your lunch money, my big brother will beat you up. Therefore, you should give me your lunch money. Okay, so this is conflating what's right to do in and of itself with what's right to do because I will impose external consequences that you do not want. Okay? There's a big difference between these two arguments. So not every argument of the form, if you do A, then B will happen, B is bad, therefore don't do A. That's not always an ad baculum argument. Really, it has to do with whether the stick is external, whether somebody else is threatening to thrash you. So for example, the argument, if you cheat on your exam, you'll feel guilty about it for the rest of your life, therefore you shouldn't cheat on your exam, that's not an argument to the stick. That's a natural consequence of cheating, possibly, depending on how your brain is wired. But a different argument is, if you cheat on your exam, I'll turn you into the student conduct office and have you expelled. That's an argument to the stick. Okay? That's an external consequence rather than okay. But don't cheat. All right, an argument ad misericordiam. This is an appeal to pity. Yes, I downloaded music illegally, but my girlfriend left me. I lost my job. I was broke, couldn't afford to buy music. I was so sad that I was broke and that my girlfriend was gone that I really had to listen to 100 variations of She Caught the Katy and Left Me a Mule to Ride. Okay. That doesn't justify the action by claiming that it's correct. It just says that there's some kind of extenuating. You ought to give me a break. Somehow, I should be excused from doing. Okay. Here is an argument from appeal to pity. And I mean, this is a very sad thing. I have no idea whether it's true or not. It was a political ad.
Sure, I guess I'm normal. I never found myself abnormal. I mean, Mom and Mama Julie went to a sperm bank, but Mama Julie's didn't take, so they just got me. I mean, I love growing up with two moms. It didn't make me gay or anything. I mean, I like boys. Anyhow, when they were adopting me, something went wrong or something. It was illegal or something. So Mama Julie never really officially got to adopt me. So when she got cancer, Mom and I took care of her, and then she had to go to the hospital. So they asked for the next of kin, which was her sister in Alabama. When she flew out, she told the people that worked at the hospital that Mom and I weren't legally related to Mama Julie. I'd never met this woman in my life. And she kept telling me my family was a sin. Mama Julie died that night. She was my mother, and I never got to say goodbye. I guess people have different definitions of what is or is not a sin.
Before you cast your vote on Prop 8, think about who you're hurting. Because honestly, they're not hurting you.
Okay, very sad story. I'm not sure how it tells you whether Prop 8 is is right or wrong, right? It's also a little bit of a red herring. We'll get to red herrings in a little while, but The problem they're talking about is the problem of having rights of visitation in the hospital, things like that, family rights. That's different from marriage, right? It's not the same thing. So arguing that gay and lesbian families should have visitation rights in the hospital is different from arguing that there should be marriage. It's a different thing. Okay, one would accomplish the other, but it's not the same. Okay, ad populum. Oh, this is a good one. Millions of people share copyrighted MP3 files and videos online. Therefore, sharing copyrighted music and videos is fine. But Mom, everybody's doing it. Right? That's not an argument that it's right. It's an argument that everybody's doing it. Yes? Okay, let's look at an example here. So do you want to be right? You want to be popular? You want to be right and popular? All right, let's use a bandwagon argument. And I want to say that I'm not singling out positions for or against.
Hi. I'm a mom living right here in California.
And so am I.
And so am I.
So am I.
On November 4th, I'm voting no
On Prop 8. Because I want my kids to
know about the American dream,
about dignity,
compassion,
and kindness.
we refuse to be scared by all the lies.
About what will be taught in schools.
So on behalf of
So many moms across California, say no.
Say no.
Vote No.
No to Prop 8.
Equality for all.
Vote no on Proposition 8. Thank you.
15 moms can't be wrong, right? No, okay, so right, this is an appeal. This is a bandwagon argument that it's a popular position, at least among the people who are here in this video. And so you want to be on that bandwagon and do what they would do. This is also an example of an inappropriate appeal to authority. So an appeal to authority is sort of saying so-and-so's an expert, so-and-so's opinion should carry particular weight in this matter. It should count as stronger evidence than something else. Well, moms, I mean, by virtue of being a mom, does that give you the right opinion for or against Prop 8? I mean, that's not, okay. Straw man. Straw man is lovely. Straw man is not attacking the other person's argument. It's attacking something else and then pretending that the two things are the same. So here's an example of it. Bob says, sleeping a full 12 hours once in a while is a healthy pleasure. Samantha's response is, if everybody slept 12 hours all the time, nothing would ever get done. The reduction in productivity would drive the country to bankruptcy. Therefore, nobody should sleep for 12 hours. Okay. So there's two things going on. One is there's sort of a slippery slope argument that if you take the first step and one person sleeps 12 hours once in a while, then it's inevitable that everybody else is going to do it all the time. Right? That's a different kind of fallacy. But the other thing is that what she's attacking is not what he said. Right? He said it's healthy to do it every once in a while. She's attacking the proposition that it's good for everybody to do it all the time. It's a different thing. Okay. So straw man argument, you replace the claim the person made with a claim that is easier to knock down. So the idea is knocking over a straw man in the cornfield is an easy thing to do compared to knocking over a real live person. Red herring, we mentioned this before, but here the idea is that you just confuse the subject. You just basically change the subject. Red herring is a change of subject. So Art says, teacher salaries should be increased to attract better teachers. Betty's reply is lengthening the school day would also improve student learning outcomes, therefore teacher salaries should remain the same. What? Okay, the ploy is to distract the listener from the real issue. You raise something else. And a lot of these arguments, a lot of these examples, the natural examples, the things you see people actually do, can commit more than one fallacy at the same time. So for example, the ad hominem or the guilt by association argument against Obama is a red herring as well. It's sort of like, what does this have to do with the real issue here? It's a distraction. What did I put there? Okay, so where does the word red herring come from? This is an example. There's stuff in there that you might or might not find interesting. But supposedly to train English hunting dogs not to be distracted by odors of other animals when they're supposed to be hunting foxes, they would drag literally a herring across the trail, which has a very, very strong smell. And the idea was to keep the dogs from getting distracted by that smell and going off in another direction. So the red herring is something to take you off path, take you off the trail, try to distract you. Okay, equivocation. I think I will let you guys look at this yourselves. Here, let's do petitio principii. So this is begging the question, circular argument. So there's no circumstance that justifies killing another person. The death penalty involves killing another person. Therefore, even if someone commits a brutal murder, he shouldn't be put to death. Okay, what's wrong with that as an argument? Well, you already start off with the assumption that there's no circumstance that justifies killing another person. So, of course, you're going to conclude that in any particular instance, there's no justification for killing another person. Right? So you've assumed the thing that you're trying to show. It's a circular argument. All right. So here is just a little laundry list of some of the examples of fallacies of relevance. Are there any questions right now? Okay, why don't we take 3 minutes for people to stretch their legs and come back at like a quarter till by that clock, just if you want to take a little break. Yep. Oh, sure, sure. I'm sorry. Okay, let's get going again. There were some questions about the waiting list and enrollments and whatnot. What I'm going to do is anybody who didn't submit the first two problem sets, I'm going to drop them from the course to make room for those people who are on the waiting list. That was, I think, announced in the syllabus that you needed to do that. So that's going to roll a few more people off the waiting list, presumably. I have no idea what your chances are of getting in the class if you're number 2, 3, 5, 7, 14 on the waiting list. I just don't know. I really can't predict how many people are going to drop. For the moment, it's all automatic, but I will manually drop those people who didn't submit the first two problem sets on time, and with luck, that'll create some room for people who are more interested. Any other stuff? Yes? If you forgot your homework? You're here, but you forgot to do it?
Yeah, I seriously forgot.
Seriously forgot. Okay, send me an email, and I won't drop you. Okay. Oops. Okay. We're now moving from, we were talking about fallacies of relevance, where the argument establishes some conclusion, but not the desired conclusion. And now we're looking at fallacies of evidence, where basically you don't get any conclusion at all from the premises. So, here's a classic one. Eat your Brussels sprouts, there are children starving in Africa. Yeah, right. Okay, so here's an example of a fallacy of evidence. All animals with rabies go crazy. Jesse says my cat has rabies, therefore my cat will go crazy. Okay? The problem with this is Jesse saying my cat has rabies doesn't mean my cat has rabies. I mean, who's Jesse? The neighbor's 5-year-old daughter? I mean, I don't. Okay. All right. So these two premises together don't establish any conclusion at all. If the second premise were my cat has rabies, then together those would establish conclusion. What's missing here is a premise that says if Jesse says my cat has rabies, then my cat really does have rabies. Right? So there's a missing premise, which if we had it would then give enough evidence to reach the desired conclusion. Okay. All right. So this stuff comes up a lot in law, in rules of evidence. So a witness can testify about what he or she saw or heard or has personal knowledge of. Jane told me she saw Frank hotwire the car is probably not going to count as evidence that Frank hotwired the car. I have to have seen Frank hotwire the car, right? The other is hearsay. Just because somebody said so doesn't make it so. Okay, so there's, appealing to authority is called argumentum ad verecundiam. And, here's an example. Professor Stark says 1 + 1 = 3. Professor Stark has, all these letters after his name, so forth and so on. He's done all this great stuff. Therefore, 1 + 1 = 3, right? Okay, it just doesn't, it doesn't matter that, I have letters after my name. What I'm saying is right or it's wrong. Or it doesn't even rise to the level of being right or wrong because it doesn't say anything. Okay. Appeal to ignorance. To study user satisfaction with our software product, we sent out 5,000 questionnaires to registered users. Only 100 filled out and mailed back their questionnaires. Since more than 4,900 of the 5,000 users surveyed didn't complain, the vast majority of users are satisfied with the software. Okay. This seems silly, but I've actually seen arguments like this in law cases. That basically, we have no information, therefore we're going to assume the best for our side. Yeah. Okay, this is an example of non-response in a survey. We're going to talk about non-response a lot later on when we get to survey design further on in the semester. Generally, when there's non-response, when people don't return the survey, don't choose to participate, you don't get data on them for whatever reason, generally that's a source of bias in the results. It's very difficult to know how those people would have responded, there is typically no reason to assume that they would have responded like those people who did in fact respond. Okay, an appeal to ignorance is saying, we don't know what they, we have no reason to believe that they would have responded differently, therefore we're going to assume they responded the same. They would have responded the same. Doesn't follow. I mean, you can assume that. You can assume that they all would have responded one way or they all would have responded the other. There's no reason to think anyone in particular. All right, any one of those cases in particular. False dichotomy. This is a very good one in political discourse. Either you support the war in Iraq or you don't support our soldiers who risk their lives for the country. Okay? You want to support the soldiers, then you have to support the war. Why can't I support the soldiers and be against the war? I mean, I don't understand what am I missing, right? It's just assumed that that isn't possible. So this comes up as well. This is like, here's another example. So if you didn't get that money by embezzling it, did you rob somebody at gunpoint? Okay, so this sort of mixing together too many ideas into a single question, false dichotomy, loaded question. Yes?
Can some of the arguments, like, for example, let me give this example, like, inappropriate appeal to authority, can that also be an appeal to ignorance?
Sure. Yeah. They're very often, when you look at an example of a fallacy in the wild, right, what people actually do, it can be more than one fallacy can be committed by the same argument. Absolutely. Let's look at an example of your false alternatives here. I'm really not trying to single out one side of these arguments. Okay, right? If you don't vote yes on Prop 8, you don't want to protect the children. Right? That's, okay. False dichotomy. All right, loaded question. Did you know that the sun goes around the earth? No, I didn't know that. It's sort of, if you ask something in the form of, did you know that? Or are you aware that? Or when this happened, that already begs the question. You're sort of getting to assert the thing, assert some fact that may not even be a fact, right, into the argument. And then, then what do you do? Okay. When did you stop beating your wife? Does your mother know you're an alcoholic? Okay. Questionable cause. So there are a lot of versions of questionable cause. The standard examples are two things happen together, therefore one must have caused the other. Or one thing happens after another, therefore the first one caused the second to happen, or something like that. And typically, the fact that things happen close to each other in time, or follow each other closely in time, or are associated with each other, doesn't mean that one has any causal relationship whatsoever to the other. So here's an example. After nearly 8 years of the Bush administration, stock market had the largest drop since the Great Depression. Therefore, the Republican government ruined the economy. Okay. Well, whether or not you believe that the Republican government ruined the economy, that's not an argument to establish that conclusion. Right? The two things happened at the same time. It doesn't follow that one caused the other. We will see when we start looking at correlation and association. It's very, very common. It's very, very common in economics and business, which is the intended field of many of you, to run a regression that looks at the association between two variables, find that the association is positive, and conclude from that if you increase one, it causes the other to go up. So, for example, If you look at the association between income and education, generally there's a positive association. The more years of education you have, until you get too many, the more your income tends to be, right? So if you do a regression of income on education, you might find that the slope is X thousand dollars a year per year of education. Okay. Does it follow that if you go and get an extra year of education, your income is going to go up by that much? There's no necessary causal relationship between those two. Okay. Yes?
What's the difference between the questionable cause and
Slippery
slippery slope?
slope, so the question is, what's the difference between questionable cause and slippery slope? Slippery slope is an argument that says, if A happens, then B is going to happen. If B happens, then C is going to happen. If C happens, then D is going to happen. If E happens, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, Z is going to happen. You don't want Z to happen. Therefore, you better prevent A. Okay? So there's an example of that coming down here. Okay. Marijuana has to remain illegal. If it were legalized, cocaine would soon follow. If cocaine were legalized, then opium, eventually heroin. Before you know it, everybody would be on drugs, from nursing infants to great-great-grandparents. The only babies born will be crack babies. People will be dying by the tens of millions from AIDS transmitted by sharing hypodermic needles. There'd be rampant prostitution so that drug-crazed women and men could pay for their habits. Construction workers would fall off buildings right and left. Nobody would be able to drive safely. Highway fatalities would claim millions of lives a year. Police and military would all become addicted. There'd be no law enforcement or national security. Doctors would be so whacked out that they couldn't treat patients. The economy would collapse. Within 5 years, the U.S. would be a third world country. Eventually, nobody would live past the age of 20 if they even managed to survive infancy. Okay? All right, so that's a slippery slope argument, not because it's a chain of entailments, not because it's a chain of consequences. It's because each of those links in the chain isn't necessarily going to, it could happen, right? All of those things could happen, but they're not necessarily going to happen. They don't even have a very large chance of happening, right? If you have something like, look, if you go downtown with no money in your pocket, something could happen. Then you might not be able to make a phone call. This is days before cell phones in my brain. Okay, so you can have a chain of entailments where there really are likely to be serious consequences. That's not a slippery slope argument. What makes it a slippery slope is that each link in the chain is a possibility, but certainly not a certainty. Maybe not even a high probability or a high plausibility. And claiming that because you get this elaborate chain that leads somewhere bad, you therefore have to nip it in the bud. Okay, so each of those steps of the progression is possible, but not inevitable. All right, so here is an example of something that isn't a slippery slope argument. If I push the detonator, the bomb will go off. If the bomb goes off, the building will collapse. If the building collapses, people will be injured or killed. I don't want that to happen, so I shouldn't push the detonator. Right? That's not a slippery slope argument. That's just logic. Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. This is another point here, right? So this whole what drugs should be legal or not legal or whatever. Right now we draw the line in one place. We used to draw it in a different place. We had prohibition that drew the line, this side of alcohol. Okay. We now draw it on the other side of alcohol, at least with some age restrictions. It hasn't followed from that our world has collapsed, right? We're drawing the line on tobacco in different places all the time, right? It used to be legal to smoke everywhere. Then there was no smoking on airplanes, then restaurants, then the sidewalks outside restaurants and public, it's sort of, it's moving around. You can draw the line anywhere. All right. Hasty generalization. So this has to do with whether samples are representative or not. What allows you? Yes, question?
I'm sorry, what was the difference again?
Between
Slippery slope and
questionable cause? Well, questionable cause says you're claiming that one thing causes another because they're close to each other in time or something like that. There's an associate. I mean, the classical examples are conflating association with causation. So two things happen together, therefore one causes the other. It's not true. It's not necessarily true. Two things can happen together and have no real connection to each other at all. Slippery slope argument is an argument of the form, if A happens, B will happen. If B happens, C will happen. If C happens, D will happen, so forth and so on, where, in fact, if A happens, B might possibly happen. If B happens, C might possibly happen, et cetera. It's sort of over-representing, giving more strength to those links than they deserve, asserting that those links are inevitable when, in fact, they're merely possible. Okay. All right, so this is one that comes much closer to statistical grounds, hasty generalization. I interviewed 20 students in the lunch line today at noon. 19 were hungry, therefore most students are hungry. Okay, well, I'm interviewing the lunch line. What do you expect, right? Okay. All right, so the argument is typically, some X are sometimes A, therefore most X are always A. And if you want to make an argument from a sample to a larger population, basically the only way to do that that's compelling is to have that sample be a random sample in the first place, so that it's very likely to be representative, and so that you can quantify the extent to which it isn't representative. We're going to talk a lot about random sampling and sampling design later on in the class. So what does allow you to generalize from a small group to a larger population? Right. So this actually came up, something very much like this. So I do expert witness work in cases that have statistical content, and one of the more colorful cases I worked on was helping the Department of Justice in its defense of the Child Online Protection Act. And when I say helping, my job was to conduct a scientific study of how much pornography there is on the internet, how often people come across it, how effective filters are at blocking it. Okay, so I have a little scientific question to answer. The expert on the other side drew some conclusions basically by doing the following thing. He searched Google and found some lists of adult websites that some people had compiled, and then looked at those lists and looked at properties of those lists. And it's like, why should that be representative of what's out there as a whole? Right? If you want to know what's out there as a whole, you need some kind of a representative sample. You need a random sample of some kind. And he drew his conclusions from a sample of convenience. He just found some lists and went from there. So if you want to generalize from your sample to a larger group, you need to be very, very careful about how you draw the sample. All right. Weak analogy. Countries are like families. Government are like the parents. Citizens are like the children. Everybody knows spare the rod, spoil the child. Therefore, our legal system must impose harsh penalties for legal infractions. Tough love. Okay. All right. So maybe countries are like families, maybe not, but they can be like families in some regards and not like families in other regards. Okay. It doesn't. People can take an analogy and then try to take it too far, which past the point where it makes any sense. So here, physicists are like physicians. Both study calculus as undergraduates. Both have many years of education, culminating in advanced degrees. Both know lots of science. Both tend to have above average intelligence. Both tend to be arrogant. Both even start with the same 7 letters, PHYSICI. Physicians treat illness, therefore physicists treat illness. Right? Okay, it doesn't follow, right? The analogy holds up to a point, but the fact that there is some kind of analogy between these things doesn't mean that anything that's true for one is also true for the other. All right. Again, this comes up in sampling as well. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it more. Okay, this is one of my favorite things because I get to talk about Yogi Berra, who I think is absolutely brilliant. Okay, nobody goes there anymore. That place is too crowded. Okay, it's not even an argument, right? It's just sort of seems to be a statement of fact. But the point is that if nobody goes there anymore, it can't be very crowded, right? So there's some inconsistency in the things that are being asserted. Okay, so generally there's a fallacy of inconsistency whenever all of the premises can't be true at the same time, as a matter of logic. So Yogi Berra was good at circular arguments as well. You wouldn't have won if we'd beaten you. I always thought that record would stand until it was broken. The future ain't what it used to be. Yeah. Okay. This is a great story. I think is what's lurking here. Oh no, this is something else. Okay. This is an example of an inconsistent argument, which is a bit of a caricature of a legal argument, but not really an utterly ridiculous caricature of some legal arguments. So two neighbors are arguing over a lawnmower. One claims that the other borrowed the lawnmower and broke it. What's the defense? Well, the lawnmower was broken when you loaned it to me. I returned the lawnmower to you in perfect working order. I never borrowed your lawnmower. The lawnmower in question is mine. There is no lawnmower. Right? Okay. All right. So here are just a summary of some of these fallacies of evidence. Inappropriate appeal to authority. Moms obviously know what's right and what's wrong with regard to Prop 8. After all, they're moms. Okay. Appeal to ignorance. We have no reason to believe that this would happen, therefore it wouldn't happen. Okay. Just the fact that you don't know what's going on doesn't entitle you to assume that nothing is going on. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. That's a good slogan. Does that make sense to people? You don't know what's going on. It doesn't mean nothing's going on. False dichotomy. You just saying it. You're either for us or you're against us. Well, what if I don't care about you at all? I mean, okay. Loaded question. When did you stop beating your wife? Okay. Questionable cause. Two things happening together doesn't mean one caused the other. Slippery slope. A chain of weak entailments. They're possible, but by no means inevitable. Hasty generalization. I saw something happen once, therefore it always happens. Weak analogy. Two things can be similar in some regards. That doesn't mean that everything that's true for one is true for the other. An inconsistency. If I maintain two things at the same time. But there's a great example, which I think is a footnote in a later chapter. It's an anecdote that I've heard told of two different mathematicians in the UK, but I think it was probably Russell that it's true of. He was asked, Professor Russell, I understand that you claim it's possible to derive anything from a contradiction. He says, yes, that's so. Okay, well, if that's so, starting with the assumption that 0 equals 1, prove to me that you're the Pope. 0 equals 1, add 1 to both sides. 1 equals 2. The Pope and I are 2, therefore the Pope and I are 1. Okay. All right, are there questions about this stuff? See another salient video before we go on to the next topic. Let's see. I don't know what's lurking here. This is a website of a friend of mine who teaches logic. Oh, yeah, this is a good one. Okay.
Hey, what's going on? That's not a pair.
2 makes 1 pair. I gave you 2. That makes 1 pair.
1 pair of shoes have a left foot and a right foot. A married couple. Support traditional marriage. All please vote yes on Proposition P.
Okay. Is that a weak analogy? I think so. All right, so we're on to stuff that's more traditionally thought of as statistics. Yes, question?
How can you find the link that you were just on?
The website that I was just on? Yeah. It's on Wikia, and if you do a search for LINGLOGIC, one word, Ling Logic, you'll find this. So this is Aviva Schimmelman's wiki site that she's setting up actually for a course that she's teaching elsewhere. And you should, it's there, it's open. If you want to add something to her examples, I'm sure that you're welcome to. Okay. Other questions? Okay. Recommended book in this class, but not required, I think, is How to Lie with Statistics. How many of you have bought a copy? Or okay. Really fabulous book. I highly recommend it. If all you get out of this class is that book, you will have gotten something valuable out of the class. So it's really terrific. All right, so statistics is about data and about trying to learn about the world from data. We're trying to make inferences. We're trying to learn something, and generally we think of making statistics as involving quantitative inferences, although often it's qualitative inferences that are interesting as well. Not all data are directly relevant for what you'd like to know, for the conclusions that you would like to draw. And there are very often fallacies of the kind that we were looking at in the previous chapters involved in trying to bring data to bear on some subject. So here is an example. There was an ad some years back. I don't know whether it's still showing. Well, I can't make this bigger. There we go. Trident sugarless gum used to say 4 out of 5 dentists surveyed recommend Trident sugarless gum for their patients who chew gum. Okay? So we are supposed to conclude from that that Trident is good for your teeth, or at least not as bad for your teeth as other kinds of gum, or maybe even better than other kinds of sugarless gum for your teeth. I mean, there's a lot of things that we might be invited to do here. Okay? But why is this not really very helpful in deciding whether Trident sugarless gum is good or bad for your teeth, or better than other gum, or something like that? Yeah.
Could you repeat the question? I was thinking.
So what? I guess the question is, I'm asserting that this doesn't really tell us very much about whether Trident is good or bad for our teeth, or better than other gum, or whatnot. And I'm asking why I would have that opinion. So. We don't know who the doctors were. That's certainly true. Yep.
But I don't think they're trying to tell us that it's helpful for you. It's just that the fact that they use a dentist's recommendation makes us automatically think that it's good for our teeth.
Okay.
If the carpenter said that, we wouldn't really think about that.
Okay.
And the dentist says it, we automatically in our minds think of the health factors.
Okay, so he said that because the word dentist is in there rather than carpenters, we give this more credence than we would if it said carpenter. So there's some kind of an appeal to authority here that dentists ought to know what's good for your teeth, right? So that's going on. There's an issue of, is it an appropriate appeal to authority or an inappropriate appeal to authority, right? So there's another comment somewhere. Yes?
I don't know how the survey was conducted, so whether it's valid or like you can have no response bias, like for example. So like who are these 5 dentists?
Okay, so who are the 5 dentists? There could be, they might have asked 50,000 dentists and only 5 of them filled out the questionnaire. Right? We have no idea what the rest of them would have said. So there's an issue, or they might have asked groups of 5 dentists, 5 at a time, until they found a group where 4 said yes. Right? No, this happens, right? This does happen. It really does. I'm not saying that they did it, right? I don't know what Trident did, but okay. So we don't know who the 5 were. We don't know how they were selected. We don't know whether it's a random sample or something else. We don't know how many were asked in all. We don't know anything about non-response bias. So we really don't know much about this survey. Okay. These are dentists who presumably know something about teeth, like how to fill cavities. Wait a second. Yeah. I've actually been to a dentist's office that had a candy jar in front. You know, it's like, does that seem like it? Okay. Any other ideas here? Okay. Do you think those dentists themselves did an experiment to see, they like randomly picked some fraction of their patients and said, you all chew gum, you go chew Trident for 6 months and let's do a dental checkup and see how you do. You go chew some competing brand of sugarless gum and see how you do after 6 months, and you go chew gum with sugar and let's see how you, I mean, these dentists presumably are not running some kind of randomized controlled experiment. Okay? What puts those dentists in a position to know whether this gum is better than other sugarless gum, better than gum with sugar, better than something else for your oral hygiene or your dental health? We don't know, right? There's just sort of, because they're a dentist, we're supposed to think that they know the answer. This is the wrong experiment. If you want people to conclude soundly, right? If you want a sound argument that chewing Trident is good for your teeth, you need to do an experiment on what happens when you chew Trident versus chewing other stuff. You don't ask somebody's opinion about whether it's good or not. An opinion survey is really far removed from the real question. The real question is this stuff good for your teeth or not, or at least better than the alternative, right? So this is somehow, it's not really relevant data, okay? And it's dressed up as being more relevant. We're invited to commit this fallacy because it's dentists who were surveyed. This makes sense to everybody? I mean, are there any questions? Okay. All right. So data with inadvertent bias. Course evaluations often ask students questions about the effectiveness of the instructor. At Berkeley, many students are absent from class when evaluation forms are passed out and collected. If students who don't find lectures helpful are more likely to skip class, the evaluation data will tend to be biased. On average, the forms will tend to report the instructor is more effective than students really think he is, right? Okay. Conversely, right? Okay, that's a hypothetical, right? It could be true, it could be not. It could be that people just come to class because they like watching the professor make an idiot of himself. And so they come, but they still don't find him effective. Yeah? Okay. So at any rate, very often samples are drawn in a way that has built-in bias. There are wonderful examples of this in the book How to Lie with Statistics. So an example that he gives is looking at the annual income of people who graduated from Yale University in some year. This is an old book. It's the most recent, I think, edition is from 1954 or something like that. It was published even before that. So the incomes that he's talking about are incomes that are in the thousands of dollars, not the tens of thousands of dollars, if I'm recalling correctly. And so what's the problem there? What's the bias that's built into the sample? Well, how do you get the data? How do you find out what people's incomes are? Well, first you have to find them, right? So I want to go out and find all the people who graduated from Yale with me in the year 1940. Who am I going to be able to reach? Right? I mean, those who kept up their affiliation with the Alumni Association or something like that, for the sake of argument. Those who bothered to keep in touch, okay, are those likely to be the ones who make more money or make less money? I mean, if I ended up homeless in San Francisco after my undergraduate degree at Yale, I didn't go to Yale. They didn't accept me. I'm not going to get found, right? So the people who are going to get found are likely to be those who make more money. Then secondly, are they likely to report accurately how much they make? No. I mean, you want to impress your classmates? Yeah, so it's like, okay, so there's a lot of reasons that you might not get a representative result from something like that. Not a random sample, real issues of being able to find people in the first place. Representativeness is going to be an issue. All right. We're now going to talk about a taxonomy of data. So different kinds of data that you can collect. The basic breakdown of variables is into three kinds: qualitative, quantitative, and categorical. Question?
I have a question about the Yale.
Yeah, question about Yale.
But wouldn't that research have some use because they would run into the same problems for people from Harvard and other schools, so the ratio will still be the same for you to understand, like,
Okay, so
more or less than other schools?
So the question is does it still give you a basis for comparison to other schools? If you did a similar survey at Harvard and a similar survey at Princeton and a similar survey at Berkeley, would they all be subject to the same biases, and therefore you could still make some kind of sensible comparison? And the answer is that would require an appeal to ignorance, among other things, because the sources of bias in the different surveys might not be the same. The rates of keeping in touch with the Alumni Association might not be the same. If one school has more team spirit than another, that could induce people to go further down into the list of income. I mean, it's really, really, really hard to tell. Once you have one non-representative result, it's very difficult to compare it to another non-representative result and extrapolate. So, yeah. Might be interesting nonetheless. So, good anecdote. All right, we still have a few minutes. Okay, so three basic kinds of variables, and these are not mutually exclusive slices through things, are qualitative, quantitative, and categorical. So qualitative are sort of adjectives, right? Hot, warm, cold, low, medium, high, short, medium, tall, dividing things into ranges, slender, average. So the answer to this is sort of an adjective rather than a number. Quantitative variables are things that are expressed in numbers where the number actually means something. It's not just a code, right? Zip codes are numbers. They have information in them, but it doesn't make sense to do arithmetic with zip codes, right? The average of a list of zip codes doesn't mean anything in particular, right? One zip code being bigger than another doesn't tell you anything. It tells you, I guess, when it got added into the list of zip codes or something like that, but not much else. But quantitative variables are things like temperature measured in degrees, population density measured in people per square mile as opposed to low, medium, high, body mass index, age, income, family size, things like that. Categorical, there's overlap. Again, all these things sort of overlap, but categorical variables are also, they divide things into categories: pleasant, unpleasant, rural versus urban, so forth. Qualitative here, in these examples that I've given, there's kind of a natural ordering to things, even though there isn't a number associated with it, that hot is hotter than warm is hotter than cold, okay? Whereas pleasant, unpleasant, there's not, there's sort of not a natural ordering to it. Zip codes are categories. They just divide places into bins. Hair color. Is there a natural ordering on hair color? Other than blondes have more fun? I don't know. Okay, country of origin. Okay, so these things are categorical variables. So the techniques for dealing with these things, ways of summarizing data, are going to depend on what kind of variable it is, because not everything makes sense for every kind of variable. It doesn't make sense to take an average of categorical variables. Right? It doesn't even, I don't know how you define what it would mean to take the average of rural versus urban or something like that. People are moving towards the door, beginning to commence to prepare to start to think about moving towards the door. All right. We can stop here. I will start next time with a story about these trade secret data, which we're going to use as an example as we move along through the class. See you guys Thursday.